Hi, and welcome to Fair Fridays. My name is Lisa, and I'm of kindness and light. Welcome to my home. Now, Fair Fridays this month of June, I have been doing the Warrens. Now, the Warrens, of course, you all know of Ed and Lorraine Warren if you've been watching my series. Tonight, I will be doing the Borley Rectory, or known now as the Borley Church. Excuse me. Now, the Borley Rectory has been the most haunted house, and they do claim it as a house, in Britain. Now, the rectory has also been investigated by the most infamous Lionel Foster, Harry Price, ghost hunters, and local ghost hunters around. Now, and of course, the Warrens. Now, the Warrens, Ed was really interested in the story of the Borley Rectory, the most haunted house in England, by Harry Price. Now, Harry Price was an investigator a long, long time ago who went in and spent an entire year in the Borley Rectory and did experiments. He was a parapsychologist and did all of these different kinds of experiments. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but I really want to focus on the Warrens. Now, in 1976, Lorraine and Ed went over on their wedding anniversary and went back every single year after that. Now, what was so fascinating about this particular house or rectory that made them go back, over and over and over again? And they went back over 2,000 times to this area to do it. Now, their first visit, they took along a skeptic, of course. They usually do take a skeptic. For some reason, they take a reporter or a photographer or sometimes even policeman would go with them to these sites that they always investigated. Now, Dan Barry was a reporter for a local newspaper and a skeptic. He just was like, no way, there's no way in ghosts, there's nothing going to be, nothing's going to scare me, nothing's going to, frighten me or whatever. But he went in and he ventured off by himself. Of course, anyone who knows about haunted places or even scary movies, they don't venture off by yourself. That is the number one rule. Do not leave the group. But he did. He went off by himself and he came running out of the room that, from another room, and come running into where Lorraine and the minister and the Ed was. And he just was screaming at the top of his lungs. He was like, I can't handle this. Something's poking me. Something's poking me. Something is on top of his lungs. And then something was hitting him. He just kept on feeling like something was hitting him. And he said he couldn't breathe and fell to his knees. And, of course, Lorraine rushed over to help him. And Ed went over to help him. And he was like, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, can't breathe. So they took him outside. And, of course, the minister blessed him and everything and took him outside. And Lorraine asked him what had happened. And, of course, he had told him that somebody was hitting him. Somebody was hitting him. And, beating on him. And she's like, okay. And then he said he just couldn't breathe. He just stopped, he couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe. And they took his recording that they were making, and it said, hit him, hit him, hit him, in a woman's voice. Now, let me out, she said. And so, of course, Lorraine took it as the person that they went in to investigate the Borley Rectory for. Now, this is where I'm going to tell you about the story of the Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory was about a an 18th century, 1800s, built on top of a supposedly church that this nun was having an affair with a monk there. Now, once they found out that the monk and this nun was having an affair, her name was Marie Laure, and she was a French nun from the church across the street, nunnery across the street. And they wanted to run away because they were so madly in love and they didn't want to be a part of the congregation anymore. And they loved each other. Well, the monk supposedly was beheaded and the nun was buried up in the walls alive. They buried her alive in the walls. So that could be the explanation of why this reporter was saying he couldn't breathe, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't breathe. Or maybe they were punishing her for being disloyal to her vows, to the point where she, they were beating her up and walling her up into the walls and she couldn't breathe. She died there, buried inside these walls. Well, of course, the person who had bought the rectory after, throughout the years, this person who bought the rectory had hired Edgar Price, or not Ed, Harry Price, Harry Price and Lionel Foster. Now, Lionel Foster and Harry Price was kind of the Ghostbusters of that day, and they had a seance. Now, seances were big back in the day. It was kind of like a Ouija board type incidents. If anybody don't know what a seance is, I'm sure as a slumber party or a party that people had seances and thought that they communicated with the dead. But they had a seance, and of course they had a medium there, and she said that the monk came through. And Harry Price did the thing, and he was like, okay, so what does he want? The Suxcurry, excuse me if I pronounce it wrong, Watergate, which was the monk's last name that he was going to marry the nun, came through that night, and he said he would set the place on fire to the rectory at 9 p.m. on March 1938, and bones would be revealed, and the truth shall come in the ashes. And surely as the clock struck 9, of course everybody was looking and waiting and stuff, and the rectory started on fire, and it burned down to the ground. Now, there was bones found in amongst the ashes, and they assumed it was the nun who was buried up in the wall. So they buried the bones in the nearby church in Liston, London, and said a prayer and everything, and they assumed it was her that did this, her bones. And the monk wanted to show that she was there, and they buried her up inside the wall. Now, another great part of this story, and that ain't great, another part of this story was Mary Ann Fisher. Now, Mary Ann Fisher was the person who had owned it, and she'd hired Harry Price to come in and live there for a year, and he of course did experiments by bells and powder and things like that, and everything was written on the walls that said, "Let me out. Let me out, Mary Ann, let me out, let me out." And that freaked her out. So her and her husband, who was disabled, moved out and sold it. And there was the first victor had like 3 or 4 daughters, and they were really educated. Back in the day, in the 1800s, an educated woman was not even heard of. But these were well-educated women, and they said they saw a nun in the garden Daddy, Daddy, they saw a nun in the garden. And he kept on going, no, no, no way. And yes, they kept on seeing this nun walking through the garden from the rectory to like the garden gate and stuff, like she was walking across the street. And then they sold the place, and a Reverend Aaron Smith and his wife kept on hearing bells and noises and found a skull in the closet. Now, I don't understand why the other people didn't find the skull, but they did. They found this skull in the closet. So they hired Lionel Pfister, and bottles were hurled at him and noises. And after Pfister, there was Charles Whitten, assisted in Price's investigation, and he said he had scratches on the walls. The walls were all, the whole room was all boarded up and everything. And then they opened it, and there were scratches on the walls, like somebody was trying to claw their way out, which makes sense, because if they buried somebody in the walls, the woman, the nun in the walls, that she would be trying to dig her way out of the walls. Like, they were like, help me, I can't breathe. What a horrifying way to die. There were scratches, noises, there was a fire, and just, it was horrible. So the whole thing burned down, and Ed and Lorraine came, and they moved it over to the church across the street, and that is what it was made. The rectory was now the church across the street, where I'm assuming it was where the nuns lived. And now they see the nun that was buried up in the walls, going across the garden into this area where supposedly she was supposed to meet her lover or her future husband to get married. And so they've made movies about this now, and people have kind of been like, well, the nun movie from the Conjuring series was based on this incidents from Ed and Lorraine, which it makes sense, because I'm not going to spoil the movie for anybody, but if you watch the movie, yes, the nun is evil. And I just, the movies that came out, you can watch them on Tubi. It's called The Borley Rectory Ghost, The new Victor moved the church to the thing, and they kept on hearing, setting up recordings and organs playing, and people fainting and pebbles falling down from the ceilings and stuff like that. And it wasn't because the building wasn't deteriorating or anything. It was just like, where does these little tiny pebble rocks coming from? It was just really weird. But Ed and Lorraine went there every year for their anniversary, and was looking for the nun and the monk. And supposedly Ed found got a picture of the monk, headless monk, in the church. And that is what I'm going to be posting at the end of this video, is a picture of that, where they're standing in the church and they see a light, and it's supposedly this headless monk. But they would travel all the way, this other rector had built a walkway for the nun to go from one area to the other, and it was dedicated to her, like a little veranda to watch the ghost of the nun to travel to and from the church. And Ed said he caught a glimpse of the headless monk, and Lorraine said that she had talked to the nun and stuff like that. Now, you think that if they went there so many times, why didn't they move them on? a lot of these places that I'm going to be investigating in the Ed and Lorraine stories, they have moved on spirits and things like that. And I'm not saying that maybe they did, but according to my research, the Borley Church is still considered one of the most haunted places in England. A lot of people have went there and still go there to see the haunted nun and the monk. Now, it's a sad story. It's a horrifying story to think that they would actually murder someone for love, bury them up in a wall and just let them die like that. That's horrifying. Nuns and these religious people, and it doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess back in them days, maybe they thought she was a witch or something. How dare her go against God and fall in love with a man of God. And he turned his back on God too, so that it was both of them that boomed. And they, like I said, they beheaded him, and they buried her alive in the church. Now, I'm going to be doing next week's series on Fear Friday on another one of Ed and Lorraine's stories. Now, they have done several cases, over 10,000 cases of stories, and the Borley Rectory was probably one that stuck with them throughout the years. They've done, like I said, they went there every year for their wedding anniversary. Just strange that they would do that, because they were so interested in the Borley Rectory. Now, I will be doing the Small family. The Small family is a family in 1974 that supposedly their names are Jack and Janet Small, and they had been assaulted by demons. Now, I'm saying sometimes sexually assaulted by demons. And they almost lived in the house where this happened for almost 10 years. Now, why would they do that? So that is next week's Fear Friday, would be about the Smalls family. And I hope that you come back and look at my videos and see what they're like. And if you like them, please like and subscribe, hit that bell button, and make sure you come back for the rest of the series of the Warrens on Fear Friday. My name is Lisa. Share some kindness. Shine your beacon of light for those in the dark. Peace.